Hey guys, what's going on? It's Spartacus here, back for week 2 of the card previews for the Grand Tournament. We've seen a bunch of new cards in this past week, and I'm going to go over them and kind of tell you what I think about them, and let me know if you agree or disagree or whatnot, and any questions you might have about the cards. So just an aforementioned, in the last thing, I feel like I may have over-evaluated certain cards because I believe that Inspire, uh, we will get cards that will slow the meta down. Inspire inherently is a very slow mechanic because you have to play the card and then you have to hero power, and hero powering is pretty well always less effective than just playing a card in terms of tempo. You know, like just dealing, for example, dealing 1 damage with your mage hero power is strictly worse than just frostbolting something. So, you know, that was my thinking, but it appears that, or it's possible at least, that we might not get any of this, and this expansion might just be a bunch of slow Inspire cards, which unfortunately might not work because, you know, Hearthstone's a fast game. Decks are going to punish slow decks, so slow decks in general just have a really tough time surviving. The slowest decks, you know, the really heavy control decks like Control Warrior and Handlock, for example, they have ways to gain high tempo very quickly through, for example, Handlock has the Molten Giants and the Mountain Giants and stuff like that, and Control Warrior, well, they can just gain a lot of armor to kind of outlast, and then they have very low mana removal like Execute and Shield Slam. So, I mean, I don't know how well these Inspire decks are going to work, and I'm just going to preface that with all these evaluations that, you know, we haven't seen all the cards yet. I'm not quite sure how Inspire itself is going to work. Right now, my opinion is it might just be a little bit too slow. But, having said that, let's just dive into the cards. First card is a Warrior Weapon, 3 mana, 3/2, same stats as Fiery War Axe. Or no, 1 more mana than Fiery War Axe, same aggressive stats. Battlecry, if you have a minion with Taunt, gain +1 durability. So originally we thought this card was however many minions you have with Taunt, you gain that much durability, which, you know, actually kind of set up for maybe not a terrible card. You know, you could kind of like build a wall of taunts and then get this down, and it would be like an Assassin's Blade for 3 mana, and you know, it would be just a super defensive warrior deck. It was like one of those cards you put in that. This way, it's basically just 1 mana more for 1 durability more of a Fire War Axe. Except you need a taunt on board. It has that stipulation. So it's just strictly bad. It's just much worse than, you know, Fireworks, and you already have Fireworks and Deathbite, which are, you know, 2 mana and 4 mana respectively. You don't need a 3 mana weapon. There's no need to crowd your deck up with weapons like that. Weapons are more defensive, they're more removal, they aren't proactive enough, and that's already something that Warrior struggles with. At least Control Warrior putting proactive minions on the board, and Patron Warrior has already started to cut 1 Fire War Axe. So in general, this weapon's just not very good. Uh, you know, just stacking up against other weapons, for example, just not good enough. In Arena, I mean, it's a weapon, so weapons are usually pretty good. Eaglehorn Bow, which is the exact same stats as this, is a good hunter weapon in Arena. So, I mean, if you don't have a lot of weapons in Warrior in your deck, in your drafting, and you see this, you can probably grab it, which is good. It just gives you one more option. But usually you will get weapons as a Warrior in Arena, so this one's probably one of the worst ones that you can pick. So, yeah. This card's probably, it's not going to see any constructed play, and it is below average in Arena. Okay, moving on. We have the Colosseum Manager. 3 mana, 2/5, neutral, rare minion that reads Inspire. Return this minion to your hand. So, on the surface, the stats are pretty good. Same stats as Druid of the Flame in Firehawk form. So, that's pretty good. Like, it's good defensively. It's good against, you know, aggro decks. Good against Zoo. It's good against Hunter. Inspire, return this to your hand. So basically, like, the dream is you play this, and they have a 3/2 out or whatever, and then you trade into that, and then you Inspire, you bring it back, and then it heals it back up, and then you play it again. Problem is, it's way too damn slow. You don't want to have to spend 3 mana all over again to replay this card. So it's just kind of not fast enough. in a way, actually, it's not a bad minion if you don't plan on using your hero power. 3 mana 2/5 is, you know, perfectly fine. It's pretty good defensive card, but there are also 3 mana 3/4s that don't have drawbacks, and this card just strictly is not good enough for constructed. I don't know if there's any sort of like rogue, like you bring it back and you use it for combo and whatnot kind of thing, but I doubt it. This card's just not good enough for constructed. In arena, it's pretty good though. You know, solid stats for a 3-drop in arena. Probably average to above average, especially since you in arena there's usually more time, so you can kind of afford to play this and then hero power something and then heal it back. Bring it back to your hand, which effectively heals it, and then play it again. There's time. There's room for brewing in using your brewmasters in arena, and there's room for this card as well. So probably solid arena pick, but not good enough to cut it in constructed. And just to preface to all these cards, constructed play, like good cards are not good enough for constructed. They need to be like overpowered to be played in constructed, and that's why so many cards just don't quite cut it. And while it's nice to be optimistic about a lot of cards just won't see play. Okay, moving on. We have the Tournament Medic, 4 mana, 1/8. Some crazy stats there. Inspire, restore 2 health to your hero. So best comparison here is a Mogushan Warden, and basically you probably want a Mogushan Warden. If you're gonna play this card, it means you're up against decks with a lot of 1 health, so Ebola Paladin or Face Hunter, and basically Mogushan Warden probably blocks more damage than this does because they can just bypass this thing completely. And you have to use your hero power in order to heal to your health, and using your hero power against aggressive decks is usually too slow unless you're like a priest or a warrior. So just not going to cut it. Not even in priest or warrior. It's just not a good enough card. And in arena, it's also pretty poor because it just doesn't contest anything, and your health means much less in arena than it does in constructed. So overall, I will evaluate this card. It's just not good enough to cut it in either format. So, I mean, unless we get to a really crazy meta where it's just Face Hunters and Ebola Paladins. But even then, like, I've never seen a meta where people are like, okay, let's put a Mogushan Warden in their deck. It's just not good enough. So, Tournament Medic is probably strictly worse than that, so we're not going to see that card. But these are all uncommon cards, and you can't really expect too much usually from uncommon cards unless you're a Paladin or something. Moving on to kind of an exciting card here, Savage Combatant. It's a Druid Beast, 4 mana. 4 mana, 5/4 that reads Inspire. Give your hero +2 attack this turn. So this card's actually kind of cool. First, it's Druid Beast, so kind of enabling the whole Druid Beast deck thing. Just another route for that. It's also good for Web Spinner. Gives Web Spinner a little bit of a buff there, because it's definitely a solid card. So the Inspire, give your hero +2 attack this turn. So for Druids, that means that they're going to have a 3 attack hero power, which is pretty powerful. My thought on the whole Inspire thing is that if there's one deck that's going to be able to pull off this Inspire deck, it's going to be Druid, because Druid has the ability to innervate in wild growth, which means that they can gain initiative with these Inspire cards. So these cards might actually be able to stick. It's like when they innervate out a Thaurissan, it's really difficult to deal with it. It's the same thing. If they innervate out this card, it's really difficult to deal with it when you're stuck on, 2 or 3 mana. So this card might get some lasting value in that case. And the next turn you can, hero power for 3, which is sick. Problem is, right now you have to compare what it goes up against, and it goes up against Pilot Shredder and Keeper of the Grove, and Swipe, which is also a 4-drop, and it's just like not quite good enough. It trades poorly with Piloted Shredder, and it trades. The problem is that if this was a 4/5, I would be saying that this card would probably be viable. It would be completely different, but because it's a 5/4, it's interesting just how that little stat change makes such a difference. So many classes can deal 4 damage that can't deal 5. Swipe, Death Bite, all the Pilot Shredders out there can all trade with this. So it just makes it different. I mean, it's good against Belcher and stuff like that, but at the same time, it just doesn't seem quite good enough. Now, if there's a Beast Druid, it will be quite good enough. So there's a difference there. And And if there's an Inspire Druid, I'm not sure. I feel like the Inspire cards that would go in here would be like the Nexus Champion and stuff like that, and an Inspire Druid. But it's still close enough to think about. I'm just not quite sure if it's overpowered enough. But it's definitely very good. So it's going to be tried out. There's no doubt about that. And I would love to see it work. Just really powerful to be able to hero power and know that you're getting 3 attack. Having that 3 attack hero power from a Druid is really, really powerful. So if this thing can just stick around a little bit, that's pretty sweet. In Arena, very, very good card. It's absolutely excellent. 5/4 stats in Arena is nothing to scoff at. And things have a better chance of sticking around on the board in Arena. And if this does, suddenly your hero power is insane. And the great part about that is that you don't actually have to spend a card. It's not like wrathing something because you're not using the card. You're just using your hero power. So it gets even more value. So in Arena, this is definitely one of the new top dogs, if you will, for the Druid class. Okay, moving on down, we have the Silent Knight, 3 mana, 2/2, Stealth Divine Shield. Not a good card. It's an uncommon card though, so again, like, you can't really expect too much from uncommon cards a lot of the time. So yeah, Silent Knight, just kind of, mediocre. Basically, you can compare this against Shade and Naxxramas. Shade and Naxxramas is just strictly better. Like, you're going to play that over this. Every turn it grows, your turn at least, and it's a threat, and you can just hold on to it for as long as you want and then unleash it. I mean, in this case, sometimes it might be able to trade 2 for 2, this card, because it has the Divine Shield, so you can, maybe it might be good against aggro. Having Stealth is an advantage because it allows you to choose the trade first, so you can usually pick a good trade and make good trades with this card, at least on the first go. And Divine Shield is very powerful. It's just not quite good enough to cut it. Just a little, it's alright, but it's not good enough. In Arena, it shouldn't be too bad. The problem is that it just doesn't, it trades against its own, it trades against 3/4s, right? You run one in, but it trades against it slowly to the point where sometimes they can take advantage of that and maybe use a spell on it or trade into it with a higher health minion. So, probably just about an average 3-drop in Arena, and Constructed just not good enough to cut it. It's strictly worse than Shade, is the best way to put it. Okay, moving along here. Argent Watchman, 2 mana, 2/4, can't attack, inspire, can't attack as normal this turn. So this card's really bad. The reason it's so bad is, okay, 2 mana, 2/4 is obviously good. But the fact is that 2 mana, 2/3 is considered meh. If it doesn't have anything extra, it's all right. It needs to have some extra stuff. So 2/4, first off, 3/2s have become far less prevalent in the meta than 2/3s. So this doesn't even trade into a 2/3 and survive. It just trades 1-for-1 with a 2/3, which isn't good enough. Plus, it can't attack. So it could just sit there and do nothing unless you use your hero power. If this red, Inspire, can now attack, forever. You don't have to not just that turn, it can forever attack. It still wouldn't be good enough. Think about it like this. Ancient Watcher is a 2 mana 4/5 that reads can't attack. Now, the ways to activate it are different. They require cards, they require silences, they require taunts, but still, when you're building a constructed deck, you can build around that. This, on the other hand, is just really poor. It just doesn't do enough. 2 mana, 2/4 is not good enough stats to justify the can't attack. So, overall, really poor. I don't expect to see it anywhere. It's also pretty bad in Arena. It's not as bad in Arena. Sometimes it'll be able to trade. There are a lot more 3/2s in Arena, so it'll be able to trade into them and such. But you have to use your hero power, which is kind of slow. So in the early game, tempo is pretty important in Arena, and this card's not going to help you out much with that. So pretty poor card here. I don't expect to really see it anywhere. Okay, moving on. We have the Clockwork Knight. The Clockwork Knight is a 5 mana 5/5 neutral minion. Battle cry: give a friendly mech +1/+1. So it's a mech, so new mech, but it's a little too slow for mech decks. What we see with mech decks right now is that they're really aggressive, and 5 mana cards in a mech deck is usually just like Lotheb or something. Maybe it's Fel Reaver, but Fel Reaver has the advantage that it's an 8/8, and that's the point, is that it's really, really threatening. Now, this doesn't die to Big Game Hunter. Technically, if you can get this Battle Cry off, it is a 6/6, so maybe it is actually better than Fel Reaver. But you have to have a mech on the board. You have to have that kind of guarantee. It's not bad. I mean, 5 mana 5/5 is nothing to scoff at. It's a pretty decent stat line. So yeah, not terrible. Certainly, it'll probably be tried in mech decks. I just don't think it'll cut it, because mech decks need to guarantee that they have that early board presence, and this card is just another high drop that they just don't have enough room for. So I just don't think it'll quite cut it, but it's definitely interesting, and it's interesting enough to test out, which is, not bad. And in saying that, in Arena, this card is definitely solid. 5 mana 5/5s in Arena are solid, and if you have mechs in your deck, then you might be able to get a good advantage off this card. Okay, moving along here, we have the Flame Juggler. Flame Juggler is a 2 mana card, a neutral minion, and it is a 2/3, and it reads, Battle Cry: deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So basically, this is I don't actually compare this to Knife Juggler. I compare it to Mad Bomber, and it's kind of strictly worse than Mad Bomber. Basically, the way to look at this is, if they play like a 2/1 on turn 1, and then you play, this card, it has a 50% chance to kill it because it's to a random enemy. If this read to a random minion, it would be completely different. If Mad Bomber, you actually have a 70% chance. So it's kind of strictly worse. 2/3 stats are better than 3/2 these days, though. So there is that, but it's just not quite good enough. Knife Juggler has the advantage that it keeps the damage repeating. Now, sometimes Knife Juggler will only get off 1, but you don't put a Juggler in your deck to get off 1 knife. You put a Juggler in your deck because it has the ability to get off more damage than just that. So, fortunately, this just doesn't seem like it's going to quite cut it in Constructed, unless we see just a ton of Face Hunters everywhere, and then it might. And I mean, Mad Bomber's not a bad card. In Arena, this is certainly not a bad card. It can kill off those. It'll actually decrease the value of Worgen Infiltrator, which is a good 1-drop, and a lot of 1-drops with 1 health. So, not a bad card in Arena. If you're going to take a 2-drop, it's certainly worthy. It's got the 2/3 stats with an upside, so there's nothing wrong with that. But in Constructed, just not quite good enough. Okay, moving along here, we have the Holy Champion. Holy Champion is a priest card, 4 mana 3/5. Whenever a character is healed, gain +2 attack. So basically, it's like a Light Warden, except it's a 4 mana 3/5. So that is the comparison. Now, here's the thing. Light Warden, I played a lot of priests this season, and Light Warden can get you some crazy combos. With Wild Pyromancer, you can just beat decks. It's basically the only way I was able to beat Handlock this season. So this card I've seen can get absolutely out of control. This effect can get absolutely out of control, and that's really powerful. Thing is, though, it's 4 mana, and it's just a little too slow. The reason why Light Warden is played is because it's attached to a card called Light of the Naru, which in itself is good against aggro because it allows you to heal your face and heal other things on the board and allow you to get favorable trades. And this doesn't. It's slower. It's like a slower version, but also a more secure version of Light Warden. The thing is, the Light Warden effect is meant to be fast. It's meant to kind of, it's not, you don't really like to build up the health over time. You like to build it up on 1 turn and then burst them down. Because, then that wins you the game. The thing is, though, that when this card does come down, your opponent's going to realize they got to deal with it or it's going to grow. And there is definitely fear in that. This card is good enough to be tried out. thing is that Priest just doesn't have a lot of room. Like, to fit this card in, it's kind of interesting. If to fit this card in, I think it's centered around like more of a Priest kind of burst strategy. It's like a burst card for Priest, in the same way Light Warden is. But now that there's more, you might actually be able to build a deck around this where you have the Wild Pyromancers and the Circles of Healing and stuff, and this is like one of your win conditions where it can kind of blast down your opponent with one of these crazy heal 6 cards in 1 turn combos and hit them in the face for 15 or whatever. So certainly a powerful card. It's going to be tested out, and it might make the cut in Priest. There's just not a lot of room. That's my big concern. There's just not a lot of room, and it's just a little bit too slow compared to Light Warden. In Arena, on the other hand, whew, this is a good card in Arena. You can play it on turn 4, trade up with 5 drops. If they can't deal with it, this thing can get absolutely insanely out of control. It's going to be one of those snap picks in Arena for Priest, one of those really powerful common cards. So, Priest's value in Arena just went up, for sure. Okay, and then we have, sorry, one more, the North Sea Kraken here. North Sea Kraken is a 9 mana, 9/7, Battlecry, deal 4 damage, common neutral minion. So, this card isn't good enough to play in Constructed, but I do think it's cool. And the reason I think it's cool is I've recently started an EU account, and it's free to play, and basically getting big cards is really difficult because big cards are usually legendaries or epics. And I have one Force Tag Max, and that's it. Like, I just don't have a lot of big threats. And this is a new big threat, so for those people like kind of just starting out, it's a big threat that is uncommon and that they can actually get. Now, it's strictly worse than Force Tank Max. It's kind of like a big fire elemental. And, you know, it's not that great. You know, deal 4 damage. 9 mana is really difficult because it's literally your entire turn, which is a problem. So it's not actually a good card, but it is a big card. And there's something to be said about that for newer players to the game. So it's kind of exciting in that way, you know, they can get this big 9 mana threat in their deck, and it's kind of scary, you know. It's got 9 health, you gotta deal with it. And at the lower ranks, a lot of people don't have Big Game Hunter. So, you know, this thing could stick, and it did that 4 damage, which also, you know, pretty valuable. So in that way, I think it's kind of cool. And in the same way, it's not bad in Arena. It's like a Force Tank Max is really good in Arena. You just want big cards in Arena sometimes. Sometimes you just need them. Problem is 9 mana is just kind of sucks because you can't do anything else on that turn. So, you know, there's that issue. But so it's going to be, you know, not that great of a big card, but it is a big card. It's another one if you need one. And who knows, you know, that 4 damage could be, I mean, 4 damage, nothing to scoff at. It can be really game-swinging. They have a 5/4 out, and it's your turn 9, and then you play this, and suddenly you have a massive threat, and they have nothing on the board to contest with it. And that's pretty powerful. So this is definitely like an average to above average Arena card. And it's kind of nice to see Blizzard putting in more uncommon cards that are big. Okay, so we are moving on now to the legendaries. First legendary is Justicar Trueheart. Justicar Trueheart is a 6 mana, 6/3 neutral minion that has a battle cry. Replace your starting hero power with a better one. So I'm going to go over all the hero powers, and I'm going to talk about in which decks they'll work and which decks they won't. And in which decks this card will work. Just prefacing this from the beginning, Justicar Trueheart's stats are crap. 6 mana, 6/3, I mean, Knife Jugglers can deal with that. Freaking most things can deal with that. Bloodfin Raptors can deal with that. So the 6/3 stats are really poor. So you kind of are playing this as like a slow card. Maybe it'll stick, you know, probably not. But it's like a slow way. It's like a slow shadow form, but you get a minion out, basically. It's a slow way to change your hero power. And we're going to go over all the hero powers. I'm going to see if this card might actually work in each of these kind of decks. So, first off, Druid. Druid's hero power changes into Dire Shapeshift. Gain 2 armor and +2 attack this turn. Pretty powerful, actually, of the hero powers. Having a +2 attack hero power is quite nice. The 2 armor, again, quite nice, but just not quite enough to make a difference. Like, especially, like, right now, think about the 6 drops that are in the game. Sylvanas, Thorsan, you know, those are the 6 drops, really. I mean, certain classes have their own 6 drops, but those are really the neutral ones that you see these days. You don't see any others, and you don't see Cairn, for example, because he's too slow. And this card is really slow. This is such a long-term investment. You're investing, like, it's just so long-term to, you know, how many times do you have to hero power for this to actually be worth it? And, you know, there's no, like, it's tough to do, like, math, but it's a lot. It's a lot of times. So, in most classes, it just isn't going to work out. So, Dire Shapeshift, while a nice upgrade, probably isn't good enough. Okay, next one. Hunter, most of the hero powers get doubled. Hunter's does not, because screw Hunters. Turns into Ballista Shot, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. So Ballista Shot, instead of doubling, it's just 3. Not good enough at all. The card itself is too slow, and the hero power doesn't even get doubled, so we're not going to see this in Hunter. Down to Mage Fire Blast, rank 2, deal 2 damage. Again, just a little bit too slow. 2 damage, again, it's a nice upgrade, but like, you need to use this hero power a lot. And the thought is that, like, oh, you put this in an Inspire deck, and you're going to be using hero power a lot. And who knows, that might work. But with my thought that Inspire deck's just a little too slow, and that, like, that's the case that'll probably be in today's decks, True Heart just isn't going to cut it. So, sorry, I'm yawning. Fire Blast just, rank 2, for mages just isn't going to be enough. The Silverhand, summon 2 1/1 recruits. This is actually kind of cool. This might be more viable because what happens is now Quartermaster gets a buff, and having 2 1/1s is pretty sweet. You can, you know, buff them, and you can do Avenge will just automatically trigger off of it and stuff like that. So this is probably one of the more reasonable ones to put it in. Paladin has a lot of early game tools that can fight against aggro, so having a slow mid game card like this isn't too bad. And just the fact that Paladin games sometimes drag on for a long amount of time, I can see this card might actually work because the value you can get is a lot. Also, Inspire might be one of those decks that works with Paladin because hitting that button and creating that 1/1 is very nice a lot of the time. It's something you really want to do. Now, the problem is that you only have 7 slots on your board. So, I mean, you know, how many slots can you afford to devote to 1/1 Silverhand recruits? And that's kind of a problem, but usually not. And, I mean, if you can get a bunch of Silverhand recruits, make sure you leave a spot open to play Quartermaster. That's pretty sweet. So, this is the first deck where it might be pretty viable. Moving on, Priest, heal, restore 4 health, it doubles it. Pretty good, restoring 4 health is pretty sweet. Here's the problem though, a lot of minions, they don't need to be restored 4 health, they just need to restore 2 or maybe 3 most of the time. And your face, eventually you'll just heal up to 30, so it won't really matter, and then your hero power kind of just becomes what it originally was. So that's kind of the problem with it, and the value, you're just not going to get as much value as it says on the hero power. So just a card True Heart I doubt we'll see play in Priest. Rogue, Poison Daggers, I think this one's pretty exciting. Basically, instead of doing the 2 damage that you originally do, you do 4. And not only that, but you can kind of, you gain, Rogue needs more damage. Oh, like, it's always nice to have more damage, and this is kind of a nice long-term investment. Every time you dagger up, you get, you know, more damage, which is pretty sweet. The thing is, I would kind of actually compare Justicar True Heart to Assassin's Blade in a weird way, because Assassin's Blade is kind of, again, a long-term investment to set up a weapon that does more damage, and Justicar True Heart is also a long-term investment to set up a weapon that does more damage. Justicar True Heart, I think, is just a little too slow for Rogue right now. You know, there are spots in Rogue, but I think a 6-mana 6/3 just isn't good enough. Rogue needs minions that can stick so that the oil can hit them, and Justicar True Heart just won't stick. So it just seems a little bit too slow, especially in, you know, the meta. and it's a common theme with these inspired cards that they're just a little bit too slow. But still, equipping that 2/2 weapon is really sweet, because while it's nice to double 1 damage to 2 damage, doubling 2 damage to 4 damage is exponentially better. It's just better. So it's an extra 2 as opposed to an extra 1. So Rogue, kind of exciting. I think we'll see it tried out. I just don't quite think it'll cut it. Totemic Slam for Shaman. Summon a totem of your choice. I believe this means, too, that you can stack totems, so if you want to just keep filling up the board with taunt totems, be my guest. Not quite good enough, though, I don't think. It's nice to be able to choose a totem, but, a lot of the times you'll have already totems out and you'll have a 50% chance to get the new one. I mean, I don't know. Shaman's in a really weird place where we honestly don't know what the deck will look like after this, so it could work, but I doubt it will. I feel like Shaman will probably just want different cards. Putting a random totem on the board is good enough for them a lot of the time. But the fact is, you could kind of build a strategy around, like, filling up your board with taunt totems or with spell power totems, for example. So that's kind of cool in that way, and I'm sure it'll be experimented with, but probably just won't cut it. Probably the worst upgrade, Soul Tap, Hero Power draw card. So instead of dealing 2 damage or drawing a card, you just draw a card. The current Warlock decks, Zoo doesn't care about dealing damage to their face because if they lose the board, they lose anyway a lot of the time. So it doesn't really matter what their health total is at a lot of the time. Maybe against like Druids or certain classes with a lot of burst, but for the most part, not a big deal. And Handlock wants to lose health. So right now, not a big deal. Don't see it being played in Warlock at all. This might be the most exciting one. The one that has the most potential. Tank Up, gain 4 armor. As someone who's played way too much Control Warrior, I salivate at that. That's really exciting for me. So the card to compare this to is Shield Maiden. Shield Maiden is a 6-mana 5/5, so better stats, and you automatically get the 5 health, or the 5 armor. So it enables Shield Slam, so it has that advantage as well. Basically, you have to armor up 3 times afterwards with Justicar Trueheart to get more armor than Shield Maiden, because then you'll get 6 additional armor, and Shield Maiden will get 5. So basically, easy, simple answer. Shield Maiden is better in faster metas. Justicar Trueheart is better in slower metas. It's as simple as that. If I think I'm going to be going up against a lot of Control Warriors, having a Justicar Trueheart is very enticing for me. Just knowing that you can just gain that armor advantage over and over and over. But against faster decks, you want the armor quick. You want to be able to shield slam quickly. So Shield Maiden is strictly better. And let's not forget, the stats on Shield Maiden are just much more imposing. So really is going to be a meta call. Most of the time you're going to be running Shield Maiden, but there might be slow enough metas where you can fit in Justicar Trueheart. So overall, I think the card is super cool. And like really exciting, and it's going to be experimented with a ton. I'm not quite sure it'll cut it. I think if it's going to cut it in a class, it is going to be Warrior. So we'll see, but overall, really cool card design. So I like it a lot, from that perspective at least. In Arena, meh. I mean, it'll probably be better than some Legendaries. It'll be worse than a lot of Legendaries. Legendaries are very good in Arena, and sometimes it just won't matter. It'll give you a long-term advantage, and Arena games are slower, so there is that. And in some of these particular hero powers, it'll be better than others. But overall, it'll probably be a below-average Legendary card. Okay, moving on to the Sisters here. So we have 2 new 3-drop Legendaries, which is kind of cool because you don't see low-drop Legendaries that often. Idris Darkbane, 3 mana 3/4. Whenever you target this minion with a spell, deal 3 damage to an enemy. And Fiora Lightbane, 3 mana 3/4. Whenever you target this minion with a spell, gain Divine Shield. So I'm going to talk about these 2 together because I think they're very similar. They are very similar. First off, they're Legendaries and they don't interact with each other. So you can put one in a deck without another. They have the 3 mana 3/4 stat line, which is solid. But the thing that we've seen and constructed is that Spider Tank just isn't good enough unless it's a mech deck. Dark Cultist even in Priest just isn't good enough, even though it has arguably a better effect than these legendaries. Dark Cultist doesn't need to combo with any cards in your hand in order to get its effect off. And if it gets killed when it gets dropped on turn 3, it's just like these guys. It gets killed and nothing happens. But if it can stick, then, its effect will get off no matter what. If these can stick, you have to make sure you have a buff card in your hand. And that's the problem. A lot of people think these cards are really good. I don't. I think that they're, fine. I think that they're good. 3 mana 3/4 is nothing to scoff at, and they have big upsides, but the fact is, right now in the game, there just aren't enough buff cards and enough buff decks, and silence is a thing. So the logical place for these would be Priest, but like I said, I think Dark Cultist is just better. Like, on the surface, Dark Cultist, you can just play it, and, its effect is there no matter what, unless it gets silenced, which is the same as, these cards can get silenced as well. So I think that, the fact that it doesn't get played because they're just better 3-drops in the game for Priest, like Deathlord and like Injured Blade Master, means that these cards probably won't get played in Priest. Now, there is like a Bulla Paladin, which runs the Blessings of Might and, the Blessing of Kings and stuff like that. And in that case, this could be pretty good. But is there room in that? That deck generally wants to be really aggressive, wants to empty its hand. Does it have room for 3-drops like this? I question it. It could, but I'm not sure. I just don't. I think the stat line's good, and I think that the effects on the card are good, but there aren't enough buff cards in the game, and there aren't enough buff decks. If there becomes a point where you can really focus on buff decks, so cards like this, cards like Dragonkin Sorcerer, which also was tried out in Priest, but was deemed not good enough, and there are enough, buff cards that we can build buff decks, then these will certainly be a part of it. But at the current day state, with not enough buff cards in the game, it's just not good enough. Now, if these cards read whenever you target this minion with anything, so with a hero power or with another minion's ability, another minion's battle cry, for example, these cards would be good enough for constructed. But they'd be very good, actually. And I can see why they didn't do it, because they might be overpowered. But right now, I just don't think they're good enough. Now, comparing them to one another, we got the Divine Shield and the deal 3 damage to random enemy. I think that they're really close. The deal 3 damage is more of an aggressive approach, and the Divine Shield is a little less aggressive. I like the Divine Shield one more. Feels like, okay, you can get the Divine Shield and then trade into what you want to kill instead of just hoping that 3 damage kills it. You can kind of think of it that way. But then at the same time, with Darkbane here, if you, hit something for 3, then you can run this in and then kill like a 6 health minion. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I just don't like randomness a lot of the time with, what things hit on the enemy side, so I prefer to stay with what I know, which is the Divine Shield. But 3 damage enemy minions, more volatile, has a higher upside, and the Divine Shield has a lower upside, but it's less volatile, so, it's a risk-reward kind of thing. I think that the effects are very similar, though. And these cards are certainly good. I just don't think they're good enough to cut it in Constructed. Moving on to Arena, I also don't think they're quite good enough for Arena. The thing is that, of course they're good enough in Arena. They're better than a lot of Legendaries, but I think they're kind of average or below average. And the reason I say that is that a lot of Legendaries in Arena, the things that make them bad constructed, like the ability for them to just get removed by one card, like a big game hunter, doesn't really exist in Arena. Sometimes you want those big cards that make a difference at the end of the game with your Legendaries all the time. And these ones are just kind of cards that are like 3 mana 3/4, and a lot of decks don't actually have spells that you can target with, so it'll just be like a 3 mana 3/4, which is good, but I mean, you can get better Legendaries. A lot of them are, so kind of just average Legendaries in Arena. Okay, moving on to the last one that we saw this week, probably the coolest card, maybe. Wilfred Fizzlebank, 6 mana 4/4, Warlock, Legendary. Card you draw from your hero power costs 0. So this card's really cool. The dream is to like play this on turn 8, and then, or play this on turn 10, sorry, and then hero power into Draxus, and then play Draxus, and then hero power out a 6/6 Inferno. That's unrealistic. Right now in Handlock, which is basically where this card would fit, there isn't enough room. Like there are a lot of low cost cards. So, you know, the fact is that this card isn't going to stick around. It's a 4/4 in health. At this point of the game, when you have to play it turn 6, people are going to have ways to remove this thing. So you have to make sure that you play it on turn 8 and get a hero power off. Or if you have, you know, a Maiden of the Lake, you could play it on turn 7, for example. But it's just too slow. A common theme with a lot of these Inspire hero power type cards is just too slow. It's awfully exciting. We're going to see a lot of cool combos out of it, and it's going to be tried out in Handlock, but I think people are going to realize, one, it's too slow, and two, it's just too random. A lot of the times you're not going to hit those big cards. You know, like, maybe you decide, I'm going to build a Handlock with a lot of big threats, and you put this in, and maybe that'll work, but that deck in general will probably just be too slow for the meta. This card might work in, like, tournaments, where they predict a slow meta, or they are targeting slow decks, and they're like, I'm going to beat every slow deck, so I'm going to bring a Handlock with Wilford Fistlebang and every big legendary in the game. And that might work. But in the latter, this card just isn't going to be good enough. In Arena, there are, again, better legendaries out there. Just not quite going to cut it. Especially since in Arena you need a lot of low drops in your deck. You need to curve, you know, make kind of like a 45-degree angle like that. Actually, sorry, like that. Camera switched around. So, you know, that you're probably not going to get that much value out of Wilford Fistlebang. So unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like it's going to cut it. Thing is, it's really cool, and I love the design of the card. If it was a 4/5, again, that one stat, that 4 health is such a difference between 5 health. And if it was a 4/5, things might be a little bit different, but probably not even that different. So, again, just not quite good enough, but good and cool, which is always nice to see in Legendaries. So, yeah, that wraps up this week's cards. A lot of them, and they're going to keep churning them out, I'm sure. So let me know what you think. If you agree or disagree or have any questions, let me know. And I'll be back next week with more card previews and hopefully a few more deck guides in the meantime as well. So, thanks for watching. I'm Spartacus, and I will see you later.